coming up on the 74th, the Liberation Day commemoration. Here on Something to Talk About, we'll talk about where you can go to mark this occasion in Guam's very sad history. That's ahead on Something to Talk About. It is the season, as we always talk about this time, where Guam takes a look at itself. It is the 74th Liberation Day, and this is a repeat performance from our guest from last year without Willie Flores, but I want you to reacquaint yourselves with Rosanna Villagomez-Ugan and Senator Regine Bisco-Lee, two who have been volunteering. I don't know how many years that's, I know it's not 74, but it's been several years that this effort has been held so close to your hearts and to many others. The Manengan Memorial happens every year, draws out all sorts of memories for all of us. Well, hello.
Hafaday. Thank you again for having us, Patty. We're just super honored. And, you know, as you were mentioning, we're here on behalf of the Manengan Memorial Foundation. It's a huge event that we put on every single year. And this year we're celebrating our 74th. It takes a lot of planning, and we have a lot of community support that helps us to put this on. But really our mission and our focus in all of this is making sure that we provide this opportunity for our Manampu, for our survivors of World War II, and our survivors particularly at Manengan, to tell their stories and to perpetuate those stories. And so so we weren't part of the original Manengan Memorial Foundation group. That's Rita Frunkis and First Lady Jerry Gutierrez, Willie Flores, and that group. But we have been participating for many years, and it's really near and dear to our hearts, and it's a very, very important opportunity for the people of Guam to come together and remember these stories and make sure that we continue to talk about them.
I'm hoping that either one of you or both of you can tag team on this one, but there are still people who are not familiar. You know, there are people who are living on Guam, transplanted from other places, and now have called Guam their home and haven't really had a full grasp. When they hear it, Liberation, they talk, Manengan, they understand that something happened there. But for the benefit of maybe those who need to be, re-educated, or perhaps even jar their memories about what happened in Manengan.
So Manengan is in the Jotnya area, and it was a concentration camp during World War II. One of several concentration camps. There are some in Chiguyan up north, Tinsa Faja down south, and a number of others spread out. But Manengan is a big one because so many thousands of people lived there over the course of the war, and many were forced to march there in the beginning of the war. They, knowing what we know now, we know that they were brought there to die. So many of them were brought there. They had to forage for food. There's a river that runs along the property line there, and many people had just lived their lives there in captivity pretty much throughout the war. There were
children who were born there.
Exactly. So First Lady Jerry Gutierrez was born there. Her mother passed away there. Many people lost their lives in that concentration camp. And just thinking about, today, in the things that, we get wrapped up in, it's nothing compared to what our Manampu survived. For all of those many years, not being able to speak their language, not being able to, being separated from their families. A lot of these things happened here on Guam, and it's very important that not just this time of year, but especially this time of year, that we talk about those stories and we remember that it's a big part of our history and our culture here on Guam.
Not only was it a place where people were forced to settle, but it also was a pool for a labor force.
Right. Yeah.
The occupation, the occupiers would pull men into service Women were also taken advantage of. It was a resource for a lot of the atrocities that took place. So you'll find throughout the next several weeks and months that where these stories and where their places are, where you're talking about these concentration camps, or these places where there was forced labor, like Chagrin.
Yes.
We're talking about an area where men were taken from this resource
Yes.
and enslaved into this work for the Japanese, and then eventually died at their hands, just so as to not leave any witnesses. So there was, when we say the stories of atrocity, we sort of take for granted, because in our lifetime, the only atrocity that we understand is the one that they tell us happened. And you know, when you hear it all your life, sometimes you don't necessarily, there's a period of my life where I was like, okay, the war, you know. It might have been when I left the island and then came back and went, okay, the war. But then as I started to get older and we started to see more and more of these older people that were coming to this place where they could finally talk about it,
Right.
it was like, wow, okay.
And it's taken
That-
them decades to get
Yeah.
to that point. And so
Yeah.
we really want to invite the community to come out and join us on Sunday, July 8th at Menengen. There's information on our Facebook page, on Instagram. You can call our office at 472-3455. But we just really want to invite people down there, because once you get there, even if it's not on our event date, there is something very solemn about this place. You can feel it when you walk in. It's just, you know, there's a reverence that we always try to uphold when we have this event. So it usually, this time it's taking place Sunday, July 8th, and it will start around 2 o'clock. We'll do the march in. Some survivors aren't able to make the march in, so we have a bus and we have, you know, accommodations for our Manamku to join us. But we march in, we have the ceremony that takes place at 3, the mass begins at 4, and then we have a dinner serving at 5. So this again is just a good opportunity for you to connect. And even if you've never been there, even if, you know, maybe, you've transplanted from the States, you were born and raised in Colorado, but you want to know a little bit more about what happened here on Guam and try to connect in that way, we welcome you.
Rox, what was your early involvement in this? I know you've told this story before about how you became involved, and you've dedicated a lot of your, I think you call them love hours, is that what it is?
Yes. I became involved because the Menengen, in terms of the Christmas display for the Friary, some of the Menengen Memorial Foundation members had assisted us with that, and so it started off, like you said, we don't have a concept of the war and, you know, and the impact other than our families were part of it.
Right.
And so I started off as a giving back because they helped us with it, and I just, like I've indicated, it's been a really big learning experience for me. Just learning everything, like what the senator had indicated about Menengen being the biggest concentration camp. We've heard stories of everybody was told throughout the island to march to Menengen, and for some reason, like those that ended up in Nomafit, they were given the same instructions, but they never made it to Menengen for one reason or another, or the Chagrin, you know. So there's an impact throughout. And with just Menengen being the biggest camp. But I've recently in my involvement in hearing, you know, all the stories and more stories this year, and now with the whole war claims issue that has come along, I had just shared with the foundation, and I don't know, Senator, if you had heard it, but I learned that I have an aunt who died there. My mom actually has a sister who was born there and didn't make it, so she died as a baby. And my great-grandmother had died there as well. And so she was already dying when the Americans came, and they had to stay at Menengen for a few days because she was already on her deathbed and wait until she passed on. So, you know, learning more as the survivors and our family members, our elderly family members, start disclosing more and more. It's really I'm just amazed at their perseverance. I'm amazed at how their strength, you know, and so that's been something that has been very important to me. And it really motivates me because I think back, and we're mothers and we have young children, and I think about the ages that they were at that age, when the war happened.
Can't even imagine.
I can't even.
I mean, it really is amazing because as women, that generation of women were, stronger than we could ever imagine being in such a scenario. Our worst days have never compared.
Not even.
Trying to keep your families together. I mean, we all know what it feels like when there's a storm approaching and there's the threat of danger to your family, no matter how strong your house is.
Right.
You get all your babies in the coop and you turn on your generator and life is
That's
fine.
for a few hours, maybe even a few days.
Yeah.
But this is years of minutes.
Years and years of suffering and years of being under threat of death was, just the whole mental capacity of it is very difficult to grasp. But we try to make the point, and I know it sounds a little bit dramatic, but that drama was our truth as women of women who had either marched or we had grandmothers. My mother was a young girl at the same time, so you can only imagine what that feels like. We're going to talk about some of the events when we after this break, talk about that, and I do want to touch on the sensitivity of what the whole year was, drawing out these stories. And I'm sure there were people who were trying to fill out these applications and revisiting this to go on paper. So we'll talk a little bit about, get their perspectives on something to talk about with this. Welcome back. We are talking about the Menengan Memorial and the foundation that was formed years ago, and it really wasn't that many years ago when this was when the foundation was established. I believe, of course, it was First Lady Jerry Gutierrez, and I do remember that Willie Flores was involved. Senator Tina Munoz Barnes over the years has been. I mean, it's taken a lot of people to get to this point where we are. I'm talking to Roxana Villagomez-Uggan and Senator Regine Bisco-Lee about the events that will take place. Now, the Menengan Valley Memorial commemoration is on the 8th of July, and that's a full day of things.
Yes, it is. It starts off early in the morning with the Freedom Run, and at different points throughout the island.
Okay.
And so
It's like it starts simultaneously in different venues?
Well, they try to time it so that everybody gets to Menengan around the same time.
Oh, okay. So the further you are, the earlier you'll
Right.
get
Yes.
there.
As
I
far
got
away
it.
as Jigo
and
south.
Maritza.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Did you do that last year?
We
Yes.
did.
Wow.
And it's
How did I
incredible.
miss
We
that?
have these, our partners are, like we have folks from the Department of Corrections, the Guam Fire Department, GPD, and a number of other partners who've been with us for a really long time. They get their people out and they carry the flags from each of those different points.
And then they time it to get
Get
there
to
at it.
They
That's
convert
precision. Well, you can only get those
Yes.
agencies to be able to make sure that they can conduct this with.
Our guard members always participate, so it's really
Wow.
Oh, it's
it must be
awesome.
something to see them all arrive at the same time.
It's awesome.
Okay, so that starts that's at 8 in the morning, or is that before?
It starts before. I did the Chagrin, the Jigo route,
Yeah.
and that started at 7.
Yeah,
We
okay.
did the send off up at Chagrin, that site, at 7 in the morning, and so it'll be Chagrin, it'll be Maritza, it'll be Agate, Tizen, PD.
Okay.
And so
In Arahan as well.
and yes, between Maritza and Narahan, to symbolize both villages. And so the agencies that are going to be participating, like the senator had said, is DOC, Guam Fire Department with the U.S. Coast Guard. They do it together. Guam Police Department, Guam Customs and Quarantine, and the Air and Army National Guard. So those are.
And what's
the
also
ones-
neat about this run is that they are at the handoff at the site. So let's say it's Jigo. At the Jigo handoff site, we try to have a survivor there, and there is a dialogue that goes between the survivor and the person who's running, and they say, "I'm handing this off to you. Please bring it safely to Menengan." And it's a really emotional thing
Yeah.
for these
Wow.
men and women who are running this flag.
Yeah.
And it's can get really hot out there, and you're running, and you really are able to use that mentality and think about the people who've endured much more than what you're going through.
Yeah.
And it's really great. Because
Yeah.
it's another way for us to perpetuate our stories and to keep those memories alive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not only do they do this relay run from the different areas, but they stop at different sites. So they will stop like in front of Father Duenas, where they had the massacre of Father Duenas and in Vicente Basa.
That's right.
Coming from the south, they would stop and do a little service at like where the lost men of Agate. So wherever they're coming from, if there is an incident that happened or a story there, they will
at
stop.
each one of those.
Yes.
And pay respects.
And
oh,
pay
that's pretty
respects.
cool. Oh, that's cool. And then once that happens,
Then-
then it's the march. It will take what?
So-
the 8 o'clock is just the gathering time.
The gathering time, and like the senator had said, that each start area will be a different time, just so because of the send off, just to be able to time it to get down
Yeah.
to Menangan by that time. And so once they all converge down at Menangan, then the march will start at 2. And so we'll have the different agencies, and then we'll have the survivors that can walk in. Anybody who wants to participate in the march with survivors, and then we have the buses, the trolleys, or the accessible bus for the survivors who want to participate but cannot.
cool, yeah.
So we have accommodations for them. There are heroes, there are honorees, and then we start the march into Menangan.
So the march begins at Ilig Bridge. So if you're going down from Jotnia, you take that road down,
Yes.
the hill down. You can't miss it. It's right there at the kind of intersection down there. We begin the march at Ilig Bridge, and we walk in, and there are a number of participants from last year, and I feel like our numbers continue to grow because more and more people are interested in participating and being part of all of this.
Yeah.
Bringing their children down and having these conversations about, yes, Nana went through this, or this is our family story, this is how we're connected to Menangan or another site, and just Liberation Parade is great, but that's just one very small part of it.
The Liberation Parade, I think, in all of the celebration was to celebrate just the liberation by U.S. forces. That was one, the big celebration with down the Marine Corps Drive. I get that part of it. That was the positive part of it. What happens once you get into Menangan?
Then we will have the service that will begin, and we have a wreath ceremony. We have a flag placing ceremony. We will have this year, we have the invocation will be given by Commander Timothy Moore. He is the chaplain for the Navy region, so he'll give the invocation. We will have the Guam Territorial Band participates, and they will play and accompany the singers with the national anthem and the Guam hymn. And that's Nick Rice and Dave Duenas.
That's right.
This year.
Oh, good.
Yes, and then we will have the Rasen
Atulati.
This is
Yeah.
and so they have a presentation. They will say the Inafresi.
Okay.
Then we have what's so emotional is the survivors. There's the fountain, the Bong Bong, and it's the water from the river. And it gets passed around, and the survivors will pour it into the fountain. There's a fountain there. The monument is a fountain, and so that gets turned on. And so there's the ceremony around that, and that's the one that the survivors
We
really
also light candles, and then we have
That's a gathering
Yes.
place.
Yes.
That's a gathering place.
Yes, and we are going to have candles.
You actually had like an actual memorial. Is there an actual
Yes.
statue, or is there
Yes.
What is it? A fixture? What is that?
It is
Is that the one you're talking about?
yes, it's the
Yeah,
this
it
is a
actually
copy
looks
of that.
right, just
Let me
like
see it.
Just
Oh,
it's,
Oh,
that's the
that's
fountain,
cool.
and it's
really
right.
beautiful.
wow.
So it kind of depicts, a family, and they're coming together. And like Auntie Rosanna said, there's kind of a pool of water.
Okay, and that's where.
Yeah.
Was there something else that you talked was going to be recently unveiled at the legislature? What was that?
Yes. So for the 75th.
For this,
For the 75th. We're already planning ahead here.
Yes, that's right.
so for the 75th, we are starting to work with the foundation. Is starting to work with the mayors to we're going to have an unveiling of monuments that are going to be placed at different sites. So the foundation is assisting the mayors to do this, is working with the mayors. So next week, Wednesday, at 10 o'clock, the public hearing room at the Guam Legislature, there is going to be the unveiling of the monument, a model of the monument that the survivors, some of the survivors had assisted the foundation with designing. And so they have their input into this. And so that'll be it. And so far we have 4 villages, not counting, as well as Manangan, where the monuments will be placed, and we're working with the mayors as to where it will be. And that's Agate, Inarahan, Barragata, and Jigo. Okay. And so that's for next year.
We only have a couple minutes left.
Yes.
I wanted to know what your experiences were in this past year, also with the heaviest concentration. It must be in the past couple months, with the claimants filling out the applications and the sort of stories that you might have heard, because you're in this zone.
Right. Well, yeah. So yesterday was actually the last day for applications to be filed for war claims, and I assisted a number of Manangku in filling out their applications, but I guess for me the most personal was with filling it out with my grandmother. And so I've heard some bits and pieces of her story, but to actually sit down with her and answer these very personal questions, and it's so personal to me too, and my story, that it was heart-wrenching to know that she was separated from her family for those many years. She didn't see her parents or any of her siblings, but Manangan was kind of the place where after the war they were celebrating that the war was over, and they all converged upon this place. That's where they got a lot of their rations from the U.S. military service members. So as much as it's a very solemn place where a lot of atrocities have occurred, it also is a place of celebration for some families.
And reunification.
Right.
If you had a lost loved one, that would be the place to go. That hopefully you would find them. It's amazing. It's amazing, and I really think that a lot of us who have never been to Manangan should take the opportunity this year, coming on the 74th, and we are in the 74th year. And a big celebration, I think, is planned as well for the 75th year.
Yes.
A commemoration and celebration, because they go hand in hand.
Right.
Thank you so much. And I think we're going to continue to talk about the plans for July 8th.
Yes.
And you're on Facebook. You can find all the other pertinent information about that.
Yes.
Senator, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Always. And I
Thank you,
appreciate
Patty.
you as well, Senator.
Thank you.
That's it for Something to Talk About. We'll see you next time.